Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. It's Stephen Skripek here from TRG Arts. Thank you so much for joining us for our fourth TRG 30. Yes, we're a month in this crazy period of time in our worlds. We're just about to get started, but before we do, just a reminder to you all that if you have questions, submit them using the Q&A button on your screen. You can submit these anonymously should you wish. Some of the questions we'll answer live at the end of our time today, but some we'll answer on our LinkedIn TRG 30 virtual network. So we'll give you information on how to join that. And a reminder, you will receive a copy of the presentation and slides after our broadcast today. Once again, I'm pleased to welcome Jill, our CEO.
Stephen, thank you. And thank you all for joining us again for our now weekly edition of TRG 30, where we address the urgent needs of our organizations and communities in the context of this crisis. We also anticipate what those needs might be in the coming weeks and months. And most importantly, we hope to inspire you to think about the revolution that you might create in practices or thinking that could, even though it seems impossible to imagine, help us evolve positively as a sector once we're through and past this time. We've been on a journey together. We'll continue today. Last week, we talked about the future. We talked about futures and encouraging segments of our database that are dormant, holdbacks, holdouts to join us when we are back on their terms through programs that we called futures programs. We also talked about checking our posture. This is something we will visit and revisit, moving from a posture of help and help us save, to let's be together. Let's be together as we imagine what it's like when we're back. And that inspiration is a big part of our hope for what you leave feeling post TRG 30 sessions. Today, we're going to talk about pivots and loyalty and planning for them, the subtle and sometimes not so subtle shifts we're going to have to take as we engage with the most loyal patrons who are engaging with us today and on an ongoing basis. But as we've promised, and Stephen, as you're going to do now, data is at the center of everything we do at TRG and at the center of our TRG 30 time.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. And just a reminder that we're several weeks now into our partnership with Purple 7, where we've launched our COVID-19 sector benchmark, which is a free international dashboard for us to analyze real time the intelligence that we can receive from data on the impact of COVID-19. Over 200 organizations have registered so far on both sides of the pond, and we've just released logins to the first batch of users for that dashboard. Thank you to those that are waiting in the queue. Please check your emails that will come from Purple 7. We're ready and working through that list to get you a login and to get you access to your dashboard. Remember, we're inviting you all to provide data free, and more information on how to sign up will follow in this email, but you can see the link on the screen there. But here's a couple of previews of those first dashboards that we've launched. Our intention is to release new insights each week that will link with the content that you'll hear on TRG 30 and provide you with the data you're going to need as we move forwards over the coming weeks and months. Right now, we've released our first key metric dashboards around revenue and ticket sales, which provides a detailed year-to-date view and 30-day view of your revenue. And when you click on one of these, you're going to see your data against our benchmark analysis group to show how you're performing in real time, day by day. This is just one of many dashboards that we're going to release to you over the coming weeks. We can all access our data on our ticketing systems, I acknowledge that, but the key to the future here is for us to learn from this benchmark group. And as more organizations join, we'll continue to share learning and data in our future TRG 30 sessions. as more organizations join, we're creating benchmark buckets. So this isn't one big benchmark group here. You'll see some of the buckets we've created on the screen now that we will be putting your organizations into to compare data against. So here's some of those that we've identified already. And once you've signed up and logged in, you'll see which benchmark group you will be bucketed into and see how your data performs against that. And we're already getting some great feedback from those first organizations. Thank you, the first to join and participate there. So our benchmark tool and partnership with Purple 7 is going to become an increasingly important tool as we navigate the coming months. Our friends at Spectrix, who are kindly joining us today, are also deeply interested in data and patron loyalty. And in response to COVID-19, they swiftly released a new tool to support not just their clients, but the whole sector in responding to the huge volume of patrons that required contacting in the immediate aftermath of theatre closures on both sides of the pond. Over the last couple of weeks, we've talked about the behaviour of these patrons in response to those cancellations and postponements. How have they donated, exchanged, and refunded their tickets? And I'm really pleased to welcome Sarah Frost, who's Client Insight Manager from Spectrix, here today to share some findings from the use of the tool. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us briefly about the tool and guide us through some data and trends that you're seeing with the use of this right now?
Yes, absolutely. So hello, everyone, and thank you very much for having me join you today. Very excited to be here. So I'm here today because at Spectrix, we've got a little bit of a theory, which is based off the data that we've been looking at across our system and the ticket converter tool that Stephen was just talking about. That basically, in these very uncertain times, we're actually seeing increased levels of audience loyalty and philanthropy. And that ultimately, even bookers sort of lower down on the loyalty ladder see the value of having arts and culture that survives beyond this lockdown. So to give you a little bit more background, on the 16th of March at Spectrix, we launched our ticket converter tool for the sector. This was in response to the news that theatres and other cultural organisations were being advised to close their doors. In a nutshell, this tool enables venues to email bookers asking what they would like done with their cancelled tickets. So suggesting making a full or part donation, or keeping the value of the tickets as account credit with that organisation for a future booking, rather than as default issuing a direct refund, which is a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction that some organisations were going through. So to date, the tool has recorded over 100,000 customer responses, and we've actually found that 63% of potentially lost income has been retained by the sector. And then within that, 21% of that being in direct donations.
Wow.
So in a time where cash flow is obviously an issue for organisations, keeping that revenue is invaluable. It also shows, I think, that in people choosing to keep account credit and the amount of account credit that's being issued, that there is a faith that that organisation will still be around in the future for audience members to be able to use it. So in the short term, this shows a sort of a feeling of goodwill across audience bases that I believe is extending beyond sort of the traditional loyalists. Steve, I don't know if you've got any thoughts in terms of what TRG think of that in terms of...
Yeah, I mean, this continues to surprise me, particularly in the UK, right? And I think the key thing is for how we acknowledge these patrons that have not only offered us donations in response to their ticket refund, as it were, but also those that have kept and, as you say, kept faith in us and held that money as credit to use against a future production. Think back to our futures talk last week. We're going to want to keep hold of these segments, first of all acknowledge them and thank them for the activity that they've done now, but prepare and plan around what the next steps for these patrons are going to be, not just when we reopen again, but also what we might be asking them to do over the coming months. So, but this is really stark that over half of that income's retained, and you're seeing that on both sides of the pond, right?
Absolutely. So that's the thing. So I completely agree that actually that long-term sort of thought process around how you continue to engage with those people that are showing faith in you at this point in time, sort of once the crisis is over, as well as in the sort of short to mid-term. So one thing I sort of looked at, so that obviously those are the little bits of data off the back of the ticket converter tool specifically. So I wanted to dig into it a little bit sort of deeper. And what we found is to further back up this theory that it's sort of a fairly broad pool of people showing this loyalty at the moment, sort of that goes beyond those self-selecting email responders, because by the nature of the tool, those are people who are responding to the email, so potentially already your loyal audience members. I've also looked at data across the whole Spectrix client base outside of the ticket converter tool, and we've actually seen huge increases in the total donated income in March 2020 compared with March 2019.
Wow.
If you look at this here, the total donated income, like real terms income, is up 57% in the UK and 22% in the US.
Stephen, 57% in the UK.
I know. I mean, we could debate around how differently we ask in the UK versus the US, right? We know there are cultural differences, but wow, that's an incredible prospect pool for the future, for sure, for engagement. But no, incredible figures.
Absolutely, and you've got to sort of keep in mind at this point as well that obviously this is considering orders overall are down. So I think this is really promising news. And then in addition to that, sort of the graph on the right-hand side of your screen, we've also seen that of the orders that are still being placed, the proportion of those orders containing donations is also up 57% across the board on average in March this year compared with last. So not only is it sort of real terms income, it's also the extra percentage of orders that are showing those donations being submitted alongside.
These are bright spots, Stephen and Sarah, that we need right now, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree. This is it's very heartening to see that this continuing support. Sarah, is there anything else you'd add or say here?
I mean, one thing that I would sort of say is, obviously this definitely shows that the audience and the communities are valuing you. So as you've already sort of said, make sure you're valuing them in return and keeping those communications open. I'd also say at this point, if you are using our ticket converter tool, it's probably worth cross-referencing the responses that you're getting back to any loyalty or audience segments that you have within your sort of ticketing system, to see if there are any surprises within there, because you might actually find that there is a loyal fan base that you didn't previously know existed, and sort of they can form part of your segmentation model.
Yeah, oh boy, yeah. Thank you so much, Sarah. I know you're going to be here if we have any questions at the end. I so appreciate you sharing this. And a ton of questions flurried in through that data, which if we get time, we will get to. If not, I know we'll respond to them after. So donations are up, granted, under different circumstances, but it's not just donations where we're seeing positive upward swings here. Many organizations, both in North America and the UK, are seeing strong results in membership and subscription campaigns. Here are 6 organizations. Current membership and subscription campaigns up year on year. These results are even better than last year. And maybe this isn't that great of any surprise, because we have these products, membership and subscription, to put in front of these patrons right now. I just want to remind you of a data point from last week about who is buying tickets right now in advance. This frequency history continues to be undeniably strong as we look at advanced sales. Patrons that have attended at least 3 times in their entire transactional history and have purchased at least once within the prior 18 months prior to our current challenges are continuing to book in higher proportions than they have historically. So if you'll sign up to the benchmark, you're going to see this data in this light in a future insight release too. But hey, this is one segment amongst many. They have historically and are now even going above and beyond, with or without product to serve that loyalty. And we've all got a different container for the word loyalty. It looks different in each of your organizations. Frequency, recency, financial investment are good metrics to consider here. So think about this in your organization. And Jill, clearly what we're seeing in the data here, and we said this last week, is that organizations are leaning into their loyalists right now.
Yeah, they certainly are. We see examples with our clients. We see it on websites. I'm just going to serve up a few, Stephen, across the spectrum of organizations that we know, as well as global corporate, the global corporate community that's grappling with this question about how to manage loyalists. Pitlochry Festival Theatre in Scotland, an example of managing and leaning into loyalists. The board chair is actually picking up the phone and calling loyalists. There's a broad spectrum of definition, but one of them includes ticket buyers who've made donations, thanking them the ticket donations, thanking them and inviting them to deepen their relationship at this time. The Toronto Symphony, who like so many have had to cancel concerts, have had guest artists who haven't been able to perform with the orchestra. So this quick and nimble team has reached out to those guest artists and created this communication tool to subscribers and donors who aren't able to be in the concert hall. And so the guest artist is connecting with those loyalists. The company in Pasadena, Boston Court, is implementing a subscription campaign. As you described, it's one of the existing categories of loyalists. But look at this language. There are brighter days ahead. Renew your subscription today, and when the day comes, we hope you'll join us when we're back in the venue. Invest in this brighter tomorrow. Can't wait to see you from my couch to yours. Really good example of those campaigns. There's a company called Brightback that I've become interested in. They provide support to what are now thousands of subscription-based companies. Harvard Business Review reported on the growth in the subscription model in business. And the guy who founded it said this: what we need to be doing right now is enacting alternatives to canceling, inviting the reasons for the relationship to stay. And in the for-profit business model, we're seeing examples of companies doing similar to what we're doing. LA Fitness got, of course, member invoices sent out and then quickly had to course correct and say, my gosh, no, of course you aren't able to use your membership. We'll tack it on to the back end, or we'll make an offer for a friend or family to experience 3 months for free. Blinklist, you may know, is a subscription service for digital books, and they are upgrading all of their memberships right now to premium. Inspirato is a luxury travel membership, global company, and you pay a monthly membership and you get access to their premium brands for all kinds of travel experiences each month. If you aren't able to use your membership in the month of March, in April, they just keep rotating it into the back of your membership. And finally, many of us may be familiar with Rosetta Stone. All of their members right now are getting access to all of the languages, some examples of the new kinds of invitations and offer expansions. This is my favorite. Yours maybe too, Stephen, as people who travel an awful lot. Delta has taken the lead to say, don't worry about your status. We gotcha. And I'm waiting for United to do something similar.
I'm waiting for British Airways.
Yeah, right. So this word complacency is interesting. We put it here on purpose. It's probably, none of you here would say and are feeling complacent at all. And yet, Stephen, you pointed to these half a dozen organizations that are seeing positive results from traditional subscription campaigns, year-end in America and Canada, year-end annual fund appeals. Those campaigns can be going along, and we cannot afford, rather we must be vigilant right now, especially right now as we're nearing the ends of those first waves of those campaigns. And if we think we can do business as usual and follow a straight path toward the future, I fear we'll run into something quite hard and big. We're going to, this photo tells a great story of the pivots we're going to have to take. Sharp 90-degree turns to the right. A couple weeks later, a 10-degree turn to the left. Our world now is going to be full of the need to pivot as we go through coming weeks and months. And Stephen, you and I began to talk about what might those pivot factors be. They could be one or all of these kinds of things. Updated messaging. In your communities, given your realities, you will need to update your messaging based on what you see in your marketplace. Next week, we're going to go into this in more detail, but boy, there is a lot of content that we've made available for free and to our broadest, cross-section of our communities. How might we create content that is directed at maintaining and engaging and deepening our relationships with loyalists? Two, like the examples we saw with Blinklist and others, are there new incentives that you will need to create for your membership schemes, for your subscription renewal? Are there new programs entirely, like futures campaigns, and certainly timelines? If we are thinking business as usual, this is how our subscription campaign rolls out. This is when we ask for, when we make our philanthropic appeals. I am reasonably confident those timelines are going to need to change, maybe have more frequency. And as we think about all of those requirements, I think we would say to you, we must start to think in an integrated way about things like policies. It's no longer going to be good enough to say subscribers get this, members get that, donors get that over here. How are our policies working together? How are our resources working together? Marketing budgets plus development budgets plus guest services or ticket office budgets. Let's combine them. Let's think about our resources together, and all of you. If you're not operating on a more limited staff team today, you are looking to optimize the staff team that you do have. And I'm now regularly hearing stories about how team members are helping team members across silos to help with this pivot. So here's some things I want you to consider when we're talking pivot. First, as you think about the next waves of your campaigns, whether it's your membership scheme, whether for your membership scheme, for your subscription, for your philanthropic appeals, consider giving your patrons a voice, enabling your patrons to tell the story. Ask Jill, the renewing subscriber, to tell the non-renewing group of subscribers why she's chosen to join, why she believes, and what that means to her. You can segment this by donor, member, subscriber at different levels. You already know those advocates and those voices that you might tap, and it can be done cheap and cheerfully, I'm certain. Second, look at the whole patron. So check your assumptions about what's right. Is asking people to give really the right next step? Could it be a ticket purchase right now? And vice versa. Are we directing ticketing appeals when a gift is the right next step? And again, this futures campaign that's designed to create frequency with our holdout patrons. This is an example from Italy, and you can see the copy here. Tomorrow's dinners for those who stay home today. Invest in the restaurant sector. Buy vouchers now that you can deploy later. Believe with us that we'll be back. We're saying the same thing about the futures program that we recommended last week for arts and culture. Couple other tactical shifts for your consideration. Is now the time to consider money back guarantees to ease nervous investors? If your premium products aren't moving, is now the time for smaller or different appeals or payment plans, not just monthly installment, but maybe multi-year commitments. The point is not as much these specific tactics, but to urge you and give you fodder for your planning now, so that when you do need to pivot, you're prepared to do that. So how might you know if you need to pivot? These 5 reasons here, we think would be good first clues. First of all, your reporting, response reporting and revenue reporting will begin to tell a different story, or when it does, if it does, that's a time for a pivot. The COVID benchmark, when that data continues to change as it does, that will suggest a time for a pivot. Your frontline staff can alert you to problems and opportunities regional, national, business realities. Seth Godin is a favorite of ours, and he says this: we can't change how things are, but we can change how we approach them. So what does that mean about what you do today? First, remember this: preparedness is key. And step one is to look at your revenue targets right now. And if you haven't reprojected them, we would say to you already, you're late. So best, middle, and worst case scenarios, consider the next 12 months. Measure yourself regularly against those 3 scenario types and begin planning now for what each of those scenarios will mean when you open your venues and open your doors. Planning is not the time for wishful thinking. We want to inspire you to believe and know that we'll be back, but planning is not the time for wishful thinking. Second, gather your pivot people. Gather your pivot people. Now is not the time for silos. I recommend this book all the time. You need a cross-functional discipline team. I know you're working with limitations. Be creative. We're hearing stories about artistic and operations staffs pitching in to help with patron calls. Be creative and think about your ecosystem as an ecosystem together. This is a time for war room thinking. We need to be able to be reactive and proactive, put all of those patron communications in one calendar and meet weekly, if not daily, to assess your campaigns, your realities, the trends, use the benchmark for certain. We need all the tools at our disposal so that we can row in the same direction. Now, this is a revolution for our positive evolution. Thanks always to my students who offer up fodder. And I know we're pushed a little bit for time. We always end on time, Stephen, but I want to make sure we're able to hear and respond to some of these questions.
Yeah, absolutely. The Q&A button is at the bottom. Any questions we don't get to, the LinkedIn Virtual Network is the place to get your answers from. Jill, as people submit their questions, the Executive Recovery Summit is an initiative that we're launching in response to TRG 30. Is there a sentence you would say about that? Everyone's going to receive follow-up links and information here, but we recognize the need for more discussion.
Yeah, you bet. This is limited to chief executives only, global. We're taking applications now. We will be scaling up these summits that will be one chunk of 3-4 hour sessions. Think concentrated time, insights from data, the COVID sector benchmark, tools to help you lead your teams toward recovery, even in the stressful and limited scenarios that you find yourselves in now. And we'll also be showcasing peers that can inspire you, ideas that you can borrow from as you look to your own recovery. Submit an application now. I'd love to see you there.
Thank you, Jill. Your image was over the book title, which was The Silo Effect. So we will also send information around that in the follow-up. Jill, there's a real mixed bag of questions. And Sarah, I know you're back here, although I appreciate we don't have much time. If we're planning revenue changes, what about financial investments for marketing in the context of everything that we've discussed today? Stay the same, more or less?
It will at least stay the same, if not need to grow. So that's why I say you've got to integrate development and marketing and guest services. This is going to be a time when we need to lean in with more frequency in a more segmented way. And it's going to require multi-channels. And I'm telling you, direct mail is going to need to be a part of this, especially as our email inboxes are overflowing. So at least the cost of sale, if not more. And I recognize the challenge that brings. So it's going to require hard, data-driven decision-making with careful attention to results.
Thank you. There's several questions about the Futures campaign, which we featured last week. Yes, previous sessions are available online. Gemma and our team will put this in the follow-up link so you can access previous. Lots of questions around the different situations around implementing futures. When will we be back? When won't we? We're in unknown. Some of you have got product to sell, some of you haven't. There's questions around, I don't have anything to sell. Folks, you're going to need to get creative. We do have the ability to issue credits. Can we call them something different? Do we need to call it a gift certificate? Do we call it a VIP package? Gather the teams that you have remaining and popcorn some ideas here. You're going to need to do something.
That's exactly right. It's like the model that the case that we studied last week from the Shakespeare Company on the East Coast. There's an example there from last week about how they've begun this effort. The Italian restaurant scenario, it is credits, it is vouchers, it is gift certificates, but our intention is to encourage attendance. We want them to invest in a future that today we can't describe, but that we know will be back, and that gives them the ability to return on their terms when our doors are open.
There are more questions around buy-in from executives, buy-in from other team members. Get your data in the benchmark tool and use data to help with this discussion internally, particularly focusing on time when we have reduced teams. We're going to talk about this next week. Where is your time invested as a team right now? And where does it need to be focused?
Yeah.
And so, Jill, there's a question here, particularly around, I'm putting out a lot of content right now, and how can I stay engaged with my real career?
Yeah. And this is the segue, right? We're putting out a lot of content right now, and the job that we have is to open our doors, which is what this content is doing. We're help the community see that we're here, and build the programs and communications and platforms for us to continue and maintain those critical relationships with donors and ticket buyers and members. We must start to pivot to directing our attention to those patrons who will be back with us. The data tells that story. They will be back with us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jill and Sarah. Sarah, there's some great Spectrix related questions. I know that you would say this. Spectrix support are your friend here to help you out. That team are ready and waiting. Questions around the data and what we're seeing there. Even if you're not a Spectrix client, ring them up and talk to them. They're great to talk to. TRG 30. Yeah, TRG 30 Virtual Network is the place where we're going to respond to all of your questions. We're going to see you next week. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for staying on for a few more moments while we answered your questions, and we can't wait to see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.